Hello, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for dropping by this video. A warm welcome to my live viewers. So, this is a talk about recovering from toxic, unhealthy, fake non-duality. And so first, just a few quick definitions, and then we'll hop right into it. So non-duality it's two things. It's a way of looking at the world, and it's a very specific, you could say it's a metaphysical view of the world, but it's also a very specific form of Indian philosophy that started with someone named Adi Shankara roughly 1200 years ago. And it's become quite popular thanks to the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, someone who lived and taught this about in the late 1800s and early 1900s. In the spiritual world, non-duality is like all the buzz nowadays. Not everybody, but it's become very popular. And what started to happen in the last 50 or 60 years is non-duality is not being presented and taught accurately. It's being taught in a very watered down way, in a very, could say, casual way, that it actually is very harmful and has very harmful results to people who take it seriously. If you kind of treat it like church, where you go once a week, you listen to the sermon, and then you kind of forget about it, it's probably not going to be too harmful. But when people take it seriously, this watered down version of non-duality, which many people call Neo-Advaita, neo-non-duality, it actually has some very, very harmful results. And that's part of why I started this channel and why I do this work, is because I personally experienced the truly life destroying, and I don't use those words casually, the life destroying effects of badly taught non-duality. Since I started this channel, I've had so many people reach out to me and share their own stories of how Neo-Advaita has been harmful for them. And of course, I know some people personally who've literally had their lives wrecked by this ancient Indian philosophy mistaught. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, is how could a philosophy, a mistaught philosophy, be harmful? And what really distinguishes traditional, or you could say classical, non-duality from Neo-Advaita, this modernized, watered down version. And then we're also going to take, I'm going to invite people to meditative and contemplative breaks as we go. Feel free to practice whatever kind of meditation, prayer, or reflection feels right to you. I'll offer some suggestions. Feel free to take them or leave them. Take what you like and leave the rest. Lastly, I'd like to share about my role here. I'm not a guru. I'm not an enlightened sage. I certainly feel I've made some significant progress on the spiritual path, and I've had some very special and precious spiritual experiences. I've studied a lot of the classics of the origin of this tradition, and I've studied with, and I'm currently studying with a traditional Advaita teacher, an actual Swami, which is the Hindu version of a sort of a combination of a priest teacher. And I'm not a guru. And even if I was a guru, I would encourage you to not blindly believe or follow anything I say, but also not to blindly believe or follow anything that anyone says. But do your own research. Please listen to what I have to say. Please develop an intellectual understanding so that you could say, well, what Arthur is saying is da 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 da. Just kind of a neutral intellectual understanding, and then dive deep within yourself and come to your own conclusions about whether what I'm saying is true or not. And I would suggest you do that with everyone and everything. It's the 21st century. Thanks to the internet, there's a lot of information floating out there on a variety of topics. And not all of it is true. Not all of it is helpful. Some of it is very deceptive. Some of it can actually take you down a dark hole if you believe it without discerning, without checking in with yourself first. So let's drop into a short meditation. You can settle yourself however you like. I find a few deep breaths, a nice little stretch of the body, getting my body comfortable, letting go of things that have happened today, coming into the present moment. And please, in whatever way it feels right to you, reach out to, have the intention to connect to higher power, however you define that. Whether you define that as God, higher self, a state of consciousness. I'm not here to preach a particular theology. So whatever idea of a higher power works for you, please invoke it, reach for it, have the intention to be connected to it, and then receive. Receive the goodness and the grace. Welcome. We've had a couple more people join us in. A very warm welcome. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll have some time for questions. If you'd like to say hello and introduce yourself, please do. If you'd like to just listen, please do. So around it was 1998 that I first heard the word non-duality. And I was told it was the highest truth, that every other spiritual teaching was inferior, was subordinate to it. I didn't know what to think. That was a very confusing statement for me, because I had explored so many different spiritual things. I kind of thought they were all true. I thought they all had their value and place. But then this idea of non-duality was presented with such conviction by multiple people that I began to think and assume that maybe they were right. Maybe this was the highest truth. I didn't really understand what it was. It was very abstract and very hard for me to grasp. But it was like, but I know it's important, and I know it's the truth, even though I didn't know exactly what it was. Like, that was my initial I also had a very profound spiritual experience, uh, connected with, I was part of a spiritual community. And so all these people were telling me this is the highest truth. And those people seemed to be very spiritually awake. And had a profound spiritual awakening experience with them. So I just kind of assumed that they were telling the truth. I left that community. It seemed to be very unhealthy to me at a certain point. And it was very hard to leave, by the way, because I felt trapped. I felt like, not trapped, but stuck. Like, this is the highest truth. And yet something feels very wrong here. And in hindsight, I can see that some of what was being taught, I didn't really believe. And some of it just wasn't a healthy spiritual community. Uh, I'm very grateful that I was able to leave. It was very difficult. I felt very enmeshed and like there was kind of like nowhere else for me to go. Like, this is the highest truth. So where else can I go? No one else knew about this, or so I thought. And then I encountered I moved, and coincidentally, the town I moved to uh, was non-duality central. There were all these different teachers teaching about non-duality. And so I just kind of dove into it. And I slowly started to understand what was being expressed. And it felt very wrong. It felt very wrong, what I was being taught. I was taught things like the world doesn't exist, that nothing matters except enlightenment, that all that I am, I'm just a witness, that my feelings don't matter, my worldly interests didn't matter. All that mattered was realizing that I'm the neutral observer. And this was the central point that was taught over and over and over again. So, for example, what does it mean to say that you're the witness? Well, if you hold up your hand and you pinch one of your fingers, then there's that sensation, right? And you might say, oh, ow, I'm hurting myself. Haha, that's silly. I'm hurting myself. But so what I was taught was, well, actually, I am not that feeling. I am the witness of that feeling. Now, if you do that again, but witness it, you'll notice a very different experience, a kind of neutrality, a detachment. And so this idea was taught over and over and over again, that my true identity was the witness, not the body, not my thoughts, not my feelings. That in essence, all I was this blank screen that just kind of watched everything. And again, this felt very not true to me. It's like something is missing here. But I didn't know exactly what. And again, I believed like, oh, this is the highest truth. Because not only was I told it was the highest truth, I was told this is the great insight of all the sages throughout all of history. And I was like, what? I've studied some of those sages. They didn't say this. But I was just told it over and over and over again. And I finally believed it at a certain point. And so this went on for a number of years. And I started to have a pretty decent intellectual understanding of what was being said, and even some experiential. Like, I would sometimes feel this deep state of peace and detachment when I practiced what was suggested. But I really felt like something was off, and I didn't know what. And then I began to notice that what I was being taught actually contradicted two things. The Bhagavad Gita, one of, if not the fundamental sacred texts of the Hindu tradition. And also, it contradicted the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, one of the great non-dual sages. So this place I was connected to claimed to be focused on the teachings of Ramana Maharshi. But what I noticed is that they were excluding certain teachings and focusing on other teachings. And I just saw very clearly that what I was being taught was not actually what Ramana Maharshi taught or how he taught. And I saw that it was harmful to me, that when I practiced and thought what I was taught, I became ungrounded, dissociated, that I didn't really have an interest in life. But after that realization, it took me almost 15 years to give up what I had been taught. I'd be like, no, this is not good. And I'd leave. And then I'd come back. I'd be like, no, this is not good. And that literally went on for 15 years. And then I finally was able to just cut all ties. Well, I won't say all. I wish all, but mostly, and really turn my back on what was taught, and then to study traditional Advaita Vedanta. And I was shocked when I did that, that what I had been taught truly was a pale shadow. It was almost like I'd been taught a word game compared to the richness and the depth and the holistic nature of actual Advaita Vedanta, which really is a systematic process of awakening and embodying non-dual living. Whereas what I had been taught was really, in Neo-Advaita, was really a complex word game and a dissociative meditative practice. So that's a lot of information right there. So let's take a little pause and reflect. So I've shared a little bit about my story, and I've shared the beginnings of what differentiates Neo-Advaita from actual Advaita. That one of them is a very limited kind of word game that focuses on a few ideas and repeats those ideas over and over and over and over again, and and says that there's only one spiritual practice to do, called self-inquiry. The paradox of all this is when I did self-inquiry, in the short term, I would feel good. And I felt so good when I would go to satsang. But then I would stop practicing or leave satsang, and suddenly I would just feel terrible. And I would go and talk to the teacher about this, and they would give me this advice that sounded so eloquent and so helpful. But when I went to apply it, it actually didn't help at all. In fact, it increased my confusion. So then I would desperately go back to satsang to get more guidance, and I would get more bad guidance, and it became kind of a vicious cycle. And so please, I invite people to reflect on their own experience. And some people may be completely brand new to the topic I'm talking about. I'm assuming most people here have some experience with non-duality, probably with Neo-Advaita. So please take a few minutes and reflect on what I said and see if it speaks to your own experience. So after I broke away from all this, I started to study traditional Advaita. And what I realized is that Neo-Advaita, if we think of non-duality as the alphabet, Neo-Advaita would only cover X, Y, and Z, and it would exclude all the other letters, and worse, it would, if you tried to bring up any of the other letters, the Neo-Advaita teacher would actually attack you or shame you for wanting to talk about anything other than this very narrow window of topics. Where in actual Advaita Vedanta, actual non-duality, it's a very holistic system that includes different practices and different ideas for different people at different stages of the journey. And once I learned some actual Advaita, Neo-Advaita just seemed to be complete nonsense to me. And then the denial started to break through. I had been aware for a long time of all sorts of scandals in various Neo-Advaita satsangs. But maybe even more so, I became aware of my own denial. I'd been aware for years, but I'd sort of put them out of mind because I thought, oh, well, the teacher's enlightened, or just the most absurd justifications for very bad behavior. Like, oh, this is an enlightened sage, I can't judge him or her, so forth and so on. And the denial broke through, that what I always knew to be true was true, that all these different Neo-Advaita teachers I sat with weren't actually enlightened, that their behavior, many of them, not all of them, but their behavior was, when they weren't up on a stage, was horrible, and that what they were teaching, well, as I've said before, it was just this very strange word game. And that was almost bordering on hypnotic, bordering on cult-like behavior, not in the sense of, like having a compound where everyone lives together, though that does happen in Neo-Advaita, but more in the sense of a kind of brainwashing that has taken me years to begin to uncover and untangle and literally get my life back. Because Neo-Advaita philosophy is anti-life. It literally is about turning away from the world, turning away from your feelings, turning away from everything human and everything that's in this world, and focusing just on one thing, this state of consciousness. That in doing that leaves the person completely unintegrated and not able to function in the world. I'm relearning how to live and how to function in the world. And I know many people who have been so profoundly impacted that they have not relearned that. It's a very, very sophisticated, delusional belief system. So that's a little bit of an introduction and introduction. And now I'd like to ask if any of the live viewers have any questions or have any comments. Feel free to type those in. Tomek. Tomek wrote, true. On YouTube, there are many, quote, gurus. I love that you put gurus in quote. And all they are preaching is the world doesn't exist. It's all a dream. There's no one to wake up. It makes you confused and worse. That was my experience, Tomek, is the more I focused on Neo-Advaita teachings, the worse I became. On the one hand, I felt this special feeling like that I knew something precious. And also thinking about the ideas you described will create a temporary state of peace, and sometimes even a temporary state of happiness. So I felt this, honestly, this kind of arrogance of like, wow, I know something special, and wow, I'm having this special spiritual feeling that most people don't have. And it just over time increased my confusion. And when I would take my confusion to these quote gurus, there was no helpful advice given, none at all. And yeah, people have told me about their experiences of seeking clarification with these different teachers, and the clarification they receive makes things worse and truly doesn't help. It's just kind of the same word game reiterated. And Tomek, I love that you were able to identify, see, Neo-Advaita is basically about repetition. And what Tomek said, there's about 10 or 11 ideas that just get repeated over and over and over and over. And Tomek has just nailed 3 of them. So thank you for your comments. And yes, the other thing is, I was speaking with one of my traditional Advaita teachers actually today, and he said true learning cannot happen in groups when talking about non-duality. He said it's like going to see a doctor. The doctor has to take your pulse and monitor your progress and in essence, be with you on the journey, that it truly is a journey and a process. And that's not possible through YouTube videos, right? So thank you for your comment, Tomek. If you have anything else to share, or if you'd like to respond to what I said, please do. Evan, it's heartbreaking to see how these dissociative spiritual bypassing teachings are being used to hide abuse. Oh, Evan, as you say that, it brings tears to my eyes. That, like, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to be lied to, right? Like, I was told this is the supreme truth. That was heartbreaking. But then to find out that all the abuse, and there's a lot, I can't say a lot, it's very common. And part of what makes it so heartbreaking is just like you said, it's like the teacher teaches a spiritual teaching that dissociates people, that disconnects them from themselves, from their feelings, and then the abuse happens. It's almost like the teaching is a setup. I don't think most teachers do that consciously, but that's the part that breaks my heart is people go seeking help. They're taught something that dissociates them from themselves. And I love the phrase spiritual bypass, because that's a great summary of what Neo-Advaita is. And then in this dissociative state, then all sorts of abuse happens. Very well said, Evan. It is heartbreaking. Thank you both for your comments. Any others? Hey, Paul, welcome back. My pleasure to share. So I'm going to post a link now. I've done some writing on this topic. Wow, lots of people just dropped in. Welcome, everyone. Feel free to type in your questions and comments about Neo-Advaita. Wow, Tomek, that is a beautiful question. Okay, In fact, it's funny, when you posted those, I was like, I need to make a list. Well, first of all, let's start with and these are, what are the fake ideas that are told in Neo-Advaita? I would say the first is just inquire. Over and over and over in Neo-Advaita, you're told, if you just inquire, this will solve all of your problems. Ramana Maharshi disagrees. Adi Shankara disagrees. The Bhagavad Gita disagrees. It's just not true. Self-inquiry in actual non-duality requires a very prepared mind. And Ramana himself taught this. The next one, I think you've talked about, the world doesn't exist. Not going to find that anywhere in any actual non-dual text. You will hear them say it's unreal, but they didn't speak English. So they didn't actually say it's unreal. They said it's asat, which is a Sanskrit term, which means not eternal. There's a big difference between saying the definition in Advaita Vedanta, and see, this is what differentiates Advaita Vedanta from Neo-Advaita. Is Advaita Vedanta is a very specific and subtle philosophical conversation, right? And Neo-Advaita is like that's been going on for thousands of years, and Neo-Advaita is like, well, we're just going to take the last hour and then claim it's the whole conversation. So asat, that's the Sanskrit word that gets translated as unreal. And the word unreal in Advaita Vedanta means not eternal. That which can change. That's the definition of real and unreal in the actual Advaita Vedanta. Very different than claiming the world doesn't exist. So that's another one. As you pointed out, Tomek, there is no person. Nothing exists. This idea that it's somehow good or virtuous to get rid of your personality, and that's connected to there is no person. That's absurd. That's just completely absurd and very harmful. The idea that karma, that not only does nothing exist, but it's a negation of such things as karma and reincarnation. And I'm just trying to think of a really good one is that there's no such thing as good and evil. That's a great myth of Neo-Advaita, where actual non-duality is here's the biggest one. It doesn't matter what you do, just believe the right things and have a certain state of consciousness. It's not spoken that directly, but that's really the message of Neo-Advaita. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter who you are. All that matters is have the correct thoughts and have this state of consciousness. Nothing else matters because nothing else exists. That's really the message of Neo-Advaita. And that, of course, leaves people completely unintegrated and, as I said, unable to function in day-to-day life. Your second question's how to recover from it. I can tell you how I recovered from it, which was I learned actual Advaita Vedanta. And then I began to untease all the nonsense that I had been taught through the lens of Advaita Vedanta. And it's like a virus. Neo-Advaita is like a virus that will operate in the background. And because I believe those things, I believed there was no world. I believed nothing else matters. And until you unbelieve that, then nothing you do is going to really help. Like you might be like, well, I'm going to get more into my body and I'm going to take care of my body. But if in the background you still believe nothing exists, then you're not going to actually really take care of your body. You're not actually going to feel well. Maybe you will. Maybe you're very disciplined. You go take care of your body, but you're like, in the background, you're like, but nothing exists and nothing matters. So So I'm kind of developing a process for how to help people do that. And the first step is learning some actual Advaita. The next step is turning your back on Neo-Advaita, really recognizing, okay, that was bullshit. Those people were not enlightened. They don't know what they're talking about. It's harmful to me. No. Making this radical decision. And it wasn't easy for me. It's not an easy decision to make because Neo-Advaita is addictive. And then beginning to explore what are healthy alternatives for a spiritual path, and what is a healthy way of life, and a kind of grieving process. Yes, we were lied to, we were betrayed, and people who fell for this, we were manipulated, and that has emotional consequence that needs to be dealt with. The short version of how to recover is learn some actual Advaita, turn your back on Neo-Advaita, and become a grounded, balanced human being that's walking on a spiritual path. And I know that's a tall order, but it is a process. It has been for me and continues to be for me. Great question. Thank you. Wow, lots of live viewers. Got maybe another little more time. So if anyone else has any questions or comments, please do ask. And I just listed off these things. It took me years to turn my back on Neo-Advaita, and I'm just, this process of recovering from these fake ideas, it takes time. It did for me. Anyway, I went very far down the hole. I recently I worked with someone who, he didn't go so far down the hole to the point where, he was happy most of the time, but just didn't know what to do with his life. And he didn't go what I call going down the hole. He didn't go so far down. But then I also worked with someone who, had a non-dual awakening and then felt suicidal and didn't care about life anymore and didn't care about anything anymore. And that person, like myself, went very far down. And so that will take a little more time. Yeah. They don't know Ramana Maharshi. They know certain parts of Ramana Maharshi. And the thing is, you have to be very careful what you read of Ramana Maharshi because almost all of it is edited. And that's the books they draw from. And then they know those books very well. However, those books were edited and arranged. Those teachings were arranged. Ramana Maharshi did not give talks, right? He talked to individuals. So I'm going to blow your mind. Hold on one moment. So if you want to read what Ramana was actually like, check out this book. It's called Day by Day with Bhagavan. And if you read and so what that is it's a record of the different people who came to talk to him. And it'll blow your mind. I'm going to give you a link right now. If you read the first 5 pages, you're going to ask yourself, do I know anything about Ramana Maharshi? Because the image we have been fed is so false and so distorted. In these first 5 pages, Ramana Maharshi doesn't mention self-inquiry once. Not once. He affirms that the world does exist, though he does say it's like a dream. But again, you have to understand what that means in Advaita. That means it's transitory and not eternal, but that it absolutely exists. You'll see him reading from a Hindu scripture. I mean, he just talks about things that if you were to talk about them in a Neo-Advaita satsang, you would be ostracized. So once again, I want to say very boldly, they do not know Ramana Maharshi. They have memorized a certain small, very small subset of his teachings. Most books on Ramana Maharshi they're not books by Ramana Maharshi. They're books that have been edited by other people who, thank you, Tomek, other people who have the same false image of him, of like, Ramana just talked about the self all the time. Ramana just taught self-inquiry, or that's Ramana's main teaching. It may have been what Ramana considered the highest teaching, but certainly not what he talked about all the time. And he absolutely did not recommend self-inquiry to everyone. So that's a great point in question. Yes, exactly. And if you want to see what Ramana really taught, there's only one book that Ramana wrote that is that step by step goes through his complete teaching. It's called the Upadesha Sadam. And he doesn't even talk about self-inquiry till somewhere it's about 40 verses, and not till maybe like verse 15. And those first 15, let me take a look. Those first so it's about I think it's about 40 verses. No, it's 30 verses. And he doesn't even talk about self-inquiry until verse 15. So it's like those first 15 verses are the things that Neo-Advaita teachers don't know about and refuse to talk about and attack. They vigorously attack. And it's like, well, Ramana Maharshi taught this. But it doesn't fit their story. So, okay. Please put in any final comments. Going to begin to wrap up. So if I do this work voluntarily, I do it as a form of service. If you feel inspired to make a donation, I'm happy to receive that and appreciate that. There's my website. I also do one-on-one coaching with people to help them recover from this, from Neo-Advaita. And what I can say is the way to recover, it's just what I described. You have to clearly see that the bubble has to pop. I saw that Neo-Advaita was not true, but it's like I had to viscerally, because it's like a virus. It grabs a hold of you, which is what any untruth does, is it grabs a hold of you and then it doesn't want to let go. So I just had to, I kind of had to fight the virus off. And the way I fought it off was to study actual non-duality. So that's really the first and foremost piece of the puzzle. Wonderful. So let's close with a minute or two of prayer, meditation, reflection. I'd like to thank everyone who joined in. Appreciate the participation to Mac and Evan. And I wish everyone a very beautiful day. And it is possible to recover from this. Again, some people don't go so far down. Had one person come on there and they're like, yeah, whenever I do that, I feel depressed. So once they understood the difference, they're like, I'm not going to do that anymore. Some of us went really far down. And part of what will help to recover is patience and faith. And trust that truth is stronger than illusion or delusion. And just stopping. I had to not go to Neo-Advaita satsangs. I had to stop reading. That was part of it. Because like I said, it works through repetition. It just repeats the same ideas over and over and over. All right, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for joining in. I wish you a beautiful day and blessings on your journey. Take care. Big love.